It may be attractive to imagine that our choices have immediate outcomes and are done with just a full degree of free will. However, especially in the area of politics, this does not hold true. The belief that we are not impacted and limited by past decisions is simply not found. Also, the belief that actions will immediately allow us to perceive some great course change and that consequences will occur immediately as well is just also not seen. While this train of logic may be useful to break down simple situations, it doesn't work with normal or complicated situations. A commonly accepted view is that the United Kingdom was inevitably going to enter World War II. This is due to the balance of power belief that was prominent in English and then British policy. It was an ingrained way of thinking and a perception of the world that was only strengthened over time. To change this way of thinking for World War II is to change the British Empire's foundational way of thinking and changing their identity with it. So when the Nazi Reich threatened to disrupt the balance of power with an especially weak France, Britain was forced to act to stop this. The present choice at that time was really made decades and centuries before with that line of thinking that had proved so successful. In many ways, it was an inevitable outcome. This is why a common favourite pastime of revolutionaries is going to war with the past. The madness that engulfed the French Revolution and the erosion of the past French society is a good example of this. Robespierre wanted to remove the church and replace it with a new belief system completely separate from the past one. Even the calendar came under attack. Marxism has a long, proud history of destroying as much as the past as possible. The Soviet Union attempting to rewrite the past and purge entire groups that it deemed were a threat. The Great Unpersoning is well known. The Cultural Revolution in Communist China is perhaps the most successful attempt to detach from the previous choices of a nation and its traditions. It was such an immense amount of force that the modern China is now more boxed by the legacy of Mao than those that came before. The effort to destroy the old China still proudly continues to this day in that nation. The question for how much our modern problems are due to past choices is very relevant. It's not totally either way, but it's certainly a core influence. There is a lag before the new choices and ideas start to have the influence that the previous ones have managed. If we were on a speeding train heading in one direction, there is a delay in stopping even if we pull the emergency brake. It will take even more time to turn around and head back the other way, and it will start off slow. This fact should be critical to a way of thinking, and especially for those who are disheartened by modern actions and what's happening. Limited impact slowly builds up, and we are easily in the start of this process for many political causes. Education represents where this theory of delayed outcome is best demonstrated and has been understood for some time. For conservative politics, this has also been a long point of concern. For current education, a libertarian or conservative education is often absent or failed utterly. Even if every child in the United States was suddenly given this patriotic, libertarian, conservative education to the highest standard, the result would be delayed. The system would also have to be maintained for the result to matter. Plenty of people in power would be around for quite some time. This is the reality when it comes to the mass education of people. Despite how frustrating it may be for those keeping up with current events, inaction among the general population should be expected. It takes a while for the information to move through and reach them. This can be hard to understand or believe, but is the reality. However, during this lag, it leaves time for forces to change the impact of information and try to control what the general population takes from an event. The less people who see that initial event, the easier it is to bend details or even change the total understanding that is finally reached. A positive element about delayed action is the fact that it can delay bad directions and also limit the damage that is left. If the direction that the country is heading in has been positive, then it is quite possible they'll be able to continue in that direction, even with bad leadership for a time. The better that direction has been, and the speed it's been heading in it, the more resilience to bad leader or periods of time there is. The stronger the foundation, the better chance it has of lasting. However, this does not mean that it is impossible for the good times to end, or a nation that has been having a great success to not lose it all, or even get worse. It may be even harder to detect what is happening, placing them at heightened risk. It may be initially more difficult to work it out. It sounds ridiculous. Yet success makes people complacent. It is very difficult for an individual to break out of this and realize that they are relaxing too much or taking too much for granted. In a societal sense, it seems to be even harder. They have difficulty working out when they're drifting or just relying on their past successes. It could be because the consequences are just larger to measure. In good times, the steady build-up of momentum towards the bad times is hidden for some time. The same principle as the train mentioned before should apply. Even if you're currently in good times, if you're picking up speeds heading out of them, that means that even if you pull the brakes on the border, you're still going to cross over to the bad ones. It is highly likely that we are now hurtling towards bad times. Reckless embrace of technology without thought of the consequence paired with heightened social insecurity. For too long, people do not realize the direction that we've been heading. It has fallen to our time now to realize that things are not right and that something must be done. We must bear the fact that even if we devote our best efforts and face with courage the demands of halting this direction, that there will be bad times and we will bear the burden of turning this all around and start the push, bring us to brighter days that were taken for granted for too long. This starts with us making the right choices as we go about our day. It will take some time for more people to also start doing this, but we cannot afford a delay. Mindlessly sending your money around has a real-world consequence. Many companies have demonstrated that they are no longer for conservative and libertarian values. To keep using these companies when alternatives are available is handing the political enemy power for no real justification. It has long been demonstrated that those on the left are more willing to change what they are purchasing and do so quickly. We have to be able to do the same. Another element is to support up-and-coming alternatives. Google has received an immense amount of money and support, and that has allowed it to reach where it is now. The alternatives are coming from a leg down, and therefore may have worse service outcomes immediately. The benefit of not supporting companies that have that advantage is that they are seeking to radically change society, and that should not be compensated. Now, a somewhat rocky service is okay. You can deal with that, because the benefit of moving power away from those megacorporations will reach other parts of your life. Most big companies also have trade-offs that might not be easy to spot. It's not always certain that an alternative is worse. Take the example of search engines. Google respects their privacy not at all, and alternatives are much better in that regard. Our actions now have to be swift. I'm sure that plenty of events that were allowed to happen in the past decades now are something that we wish had more debate. Now is our time to make sure that we will be looked back fondly in the future. For too long we relied on the past success, and we have run out of that. The saying, strong men create good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men create bad times. Bad times create strong men, has never been more fitting. As we enter these bad times, it's going to be quite the challenge. Self-improvement is always a great thing to do, and as the world systems fall apart, I'd recommend we try our best to find something new and improve about ourselves. Finding that something, it could be simple as learning a new skill, fixing something instead of getting a new replacement. We're going to be placed under quite a lot of different stresses we may initially think possible. That is also a good way to get a well-rounded perspective of new issues. If you have more knowledge, you can have more perspective. As I mentioned before, things may be looking quite grim, but it does take time. We have to play catch up. And while it is understandable that we would love to see immediate changes, and sometimes one action can have an immediate follow-up that is quite impressive, that's unlikely to happen. There is no substitute for hard work. There's no evidence that you can just skip that process. If there is, I would love to hear it in the comments. During this time, we have to be careful that we are not disheartened. Those who do not wish for us to continue on, and they do not wish for us to have any power, want to highlight every single moment that something falls flat, when an action doesn't deliver an immediate great result. These situations are complicated, and delay is only really one part of it. Behind every single simple news article is something much more complicated that has been simplified for you to understand. And that simplification loses some of its, deeper meaning. Remember that even with that simplified view, there is going to be a trend in one direction. If enough hard work and good people focus their mind on something, it is truly impossible to stop. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed the video.